Welcome to the California Fall Weather Outlook webinar. This one's co-hosted by Cal OES and the California Resiliency Alliance. The mission of the California Resiliency Alliance is to empower local and regional resiliency through information sharing and partnerships, which is exactly what this webinar is. This is bringing in and working with our National Weather Service to provide that outlook and information on what might we see in the coming months, so that organizations can be more proactive in their own planning. Fall tends to be California's more active fire season and a time when we're more likely to see offshore wind events, which is one of the factors influencing PSPS events. Our webinar today will focus on kind of the weather outlook for the fall, but one of the reasons we don't have the slide deck up is Brian decided he's going to actually walk us through online resources and make this more interactive in that sense. So it's not just, oh, here's a static slide of what to see, but actually take you to the website and show you where you can find this information so you can go back and keep monitoring things on your own as you just choose to as well. So it is much more of an interactive learning opportunity in that sense. Following the presentation, we will have a moderated Q&A session. You can submit your questions at any time via the chat feature, and I will be collecting those and we'll be going through Q&A at the end. I would now like to hand it over to Abby Browning, Chief of Private Sector and NGO Coordination at Cal OES, to introduce our presenter.
Well, thank you, Monica, and thank you for putting this together, drawing on us as we're all terribly busy responding to and dealing with the pandemic, the heat waves, the energy insecurity, and of course the fires. We have got to be thinking forward and thinking about what's coming next, because there is no breaks in California. We are constantly moving around, and so thank you for having the foresight to bring this to the business community. We appreciate all of your work. I mean, everything you do. I couldn't do my job if you weren't doing your job, so we are grateful for that. Thank you for bringing Brian Garcia onto the call. He is with the National Weather Service. I have a brief bio for Brian, but just know that he's bounced all around the country being a meteorologist and working for the National Weather Service. And like most things in California, when we want the best, we go get the best. So we have Brian now working for California. Well, he works for the National Weather Service, but he is in California, in Monterey, dealing with he is the warning coordination meteorologist for the Greater Bay Area. So having said that, we're thankful he's not out surfing today and joining us on the call. And so I'm going to pass this over to Brian and let him give you the highlights of what's getting ready to happen to us this fall. Thanks.
Thanks, Abby. And, you know, I had to throw the surfboard back, had to have some kind of background back there. So that's back there. I thank you, everybody, for joining the call. I'm just kind of looking at the list. Anybody who's on the phone, I really apologize. I will try to describe things as best I can as I go through it. If you're just on the phone, but this is really going to kind of interact type of session. I definitely want to say hey to my friend Dave Cruz out there. Hey, Dave, how you doing? Hope all's well. Saw you pop in there. So the what we're going to do today, like Monica was talking about, is it's much more interactive as opposed to just a slide deck and me droning on forever. So I know that Monica is going to have a moderated Q&A at the end, but I also want to open this up throughout my time talking here, and I'm not going to talk forever, because I want to hear also from you guys what you would like to see, what you're interested in, how I can help send you to some resources or point some resources out to you along the way. And so if you have a question along the way, throw it in the chat. And Monica, if you see things come through on chat that that are of note that I can answer right out the gate, by all means, let me know. We can do that as we go. So with that, I am going to share my screen. And just so you know, from the get-go, from the onset here, this is going to be like me sitting down at the computer and starting to get situationally aware of what's going on around the area. So this is kind of the process that I go through. A lot of the online tools that I use at home through teleworking. So these are things that life. Not every single one of them, because I'll show you a couple that I actually have to log into. But we can at least do, let's see here. There we go. Okay, we can at least try to do as best we can here. So I'm gonna move this out of the way. And Monica, can you verify that you can see you see that PowerPoint you sent me?
We can see the screen.
Okay, great, fantastic. So let's do this. We are gonna go over here. And look, there's your email. So one of the first things I like to do is I like to get situationally aware, like what's going on, where, how, when, and why. And we're going to dig into a lot of these tools and show you some things. Now, I'm also going to talk about the forecast a bit in terms of what we can expect over the next week, 2 weeks, and the rest of the fall season. So this is going to kind of be a progressive type of webinar here. I'm going to close a couple tabs so I can see some things. As just kind of a gee whiz, a go back. So in August, I don't know if any of you remember, but we had a little bit of a lightning storm come through our area. And what it looked like, right, across California and actually goes out into Nevada and up into Oregon, if I remember right. It'll plot them again. A little bit up into Oregon, but really California, Nevada. So over this total area, we had over 14,000 strikes, and you can see the density was the highest through the Bay Area. This is kind of a cool map. You guys can't get to this necessarily. A friend of mine up in our Sacramento office actually created this for me. But what we can do is if you are in, let's say, Alameda County, we can actually highlight your county there, 185 strikes in Alameda County. So just to kind of give you some idea of what we had across California with the lightning event that happened last year. So one of the first places I like to go when I log in the morning is I like to see what our local office is doing. So the office that I work out of here in the San Francisco Bay Area. I can take a quick look. When I see white across the board, across our area of responsibility, I'm really happy with this. This is a good thing because that means nothing's really going on. In the offshore waters, we do have some small crafts that's just due to wind. So next thing I like to do here is I like to come over, and I haven't refreshed this in a little bit. I'll come over and look at the satellite, and we're going to zoom out. So if you want to find this satellite, it's become very, very popular over the past month. A lot of people have been starting to use this, which is great. If you just go into your favorite web search engine and type in CIRA, C-I-R-A, you see it down here in the bottom right, it's C-I-R-A, and slider, S-L-I-D-E-R. You'll come up with this. It'll be the first link. It is default to go 16 here for the eastern half of the U.S. The other side of the globe, and it actually looks out towards Europe and stuff too, which is really neat. You'll want to default it to go 17, which is our western side. And then the sector, it'll come up, start as full disk, and I'll actually show you this really quick because it's actually really cool. So the satellite literally sits over the equator right here in the middle of this disk. So the full disk, you can obviously see this full disk of the globe, which is really neat because then you can get an idea of what's going on. Like down here off of Baja, there's a tropical system here, which is really neat. You could zoom in and take a look at that. Up over the Gulf of Alaska, we have this broad area of low pressure here, kind of wrapping up in there. But you'll want to switch it to the contiguous United States, United States, so you can zoom in locally here and see what's going on with a little bit more detail. Also here you can see mesoscale 1 and 2. Those actually will give you even tighter areas to look at, and they return imagery on the 1 minute time scale, whereas this is a 5 minute time scale. So what I like to do is I like to come in here and take a look, see what's going on. That broad system up in the Gulf of Alaska, we can kind of see its tail down here, cold. That's going to play a factor in our weather moving forward into the weekend and a little bit into early next week. It has some ramifications for that. But one of the things that we really looked at in late August and early September was a lot of smoke. So in this image, it's actually really neat. You can see kind of the brownish color in here, not the land brown, but it's kind of just like this hazy brown sitting in there and a hazy brown sitting in South Valley. This is where the creek fire is right here. And then you can see this hazy brown going up over Eastern Oregon. So that's actually smoke in the air. So you can actually track it through the satellite, which is how we track where the smoke's going and how we can actually put it in the forecast. All the bright white, like offshore, off the coast of Central and Southern California here. Actually, I'm going to move up here a little bit. That's all the low clouds. And then all of these other clouds, like out over Nevada, those are more of mid to high level clouds. And what's really cool is in the afternoon or in the evening and in the morning, as the sun's setting or rising, you can see the shadows of these mid to high level clouds on the earth, which is really neat. But so this is one of the things I use for situational awareness, just kind of get an idea of what's going on. Okay, so now I got an idea of what's going on. Where do I go from here? So one of the places that I like to, and this is a paid account. You guys can't necessarily get to this. There are other resources online that I'll show you, but they aren't as robust and as easy as this. I go into model data and start to look at some things. And so I'm going to show you a bit of the forecast. This is where we intertwine the forecast with our talk today. So I'm going to go here, choose the latest model run, see how far we're out. Okay, I'm going to go back. Actually, let me do this. Apologies, kind of need to refresh some things here, make sure I have the latest information going here. Okay, that's not out all the way. Okay, so we are going to look kind of like we did from the get-go with the satellite, kind of take that broad scale look. I'm going to take that broad scale look here too. We're going to look at North America, and we are going to look at, if it loads, there it goes. We are going to look at jet stream. So this sits up about where jet airplanes fly. So tens of thousands of feet up. It's the kind of the overarching driver of our weather. And so we're looking for this pattern, how it kind of wiggles through what we call the mid-latitudes. And we're going to look at this and kind of make some determinations based on this of what we're going to see for the rest of the week. And all times and most meteorological data in Zulu or Greenwich Meridian Time, GMT, or UTC, Universal Time Coordinate. That's all like right through London. So everything's based off of that time. So if you see 0Z up here, that's like 5 p.m. on Monday. So we're going to step forward here through time, and we see kind of this sagging trough over California, over the western U.S. And as we step forward, it starts to lift out, and we get a little bit of this kind of reddish area nudging northward from the south. And here, down here in the brown, you can actually see that tropical system that we saw on the satellite. So that's the tropical system. So if we keep stepping forward, building from the south of this, what we call a ridge. So this ridge is going to bring us a little bit of a warming trend. So we'll see that warming trend midweek through probably Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, today, tomorrow, and Thursday. And then we get this other little trough that kind of clips the area. Now this one we've been watching very closely over the last several days to see how it manifests itself once it gets once it gets behind us, and I don't have enough data there. Let's go back here. Once it gets behind California, so a little bit downstream. So as it kind of drops down a little bit there, it just kind of sags just a little bit over the Great Basin, that Utah, Nevada region. And that little bit of a sag is actually going to cause us some issues in terms of fire weather, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But behind that, you see everything else remains shifted north, favoring the Pacific Northwest with those higher winds. And you can see the greens up here. That's just a thinner atmosphere up there, whereas the reds are a thicker atmosphere. So they have less atmosphere above them, so it's going to be a little cooler up there. We have more atmosphere above us, so it's actually going to be a little warmer. And that's something we've been looking at for the last several days, because we have this darker area of red sitting over us, and you can start to see it amplify as we get late into the weekend and into early next week. We get deeper into those reds. And this means that we are going to move into a heat event. So when we get these ridges set up, we really start to talk about heat. And it just remains in place and actually amplifies up into the Pacific Northwest through the early part of next week. At that point, we're not so much under the influence of the core of this high pressure, but we're kind of on the periphery. So it'll remain warm and dry through much of next week. So when we get into these patterns, though, when we have this very amplified ridge, this is the typical signal that we look at in the fall for our significant fire weather concerns. So when we see the jet go up into the Gulf of Alaska, then dive down through Western Canada and dive down into the Great Basin here and slide across the south central US, that's when we really start to worry about significant fire weather concerns. This is out at the end of the model run, so things out this far, typically we don't give a lot of weight because they will change in time. So this is something we'll have to watch. And honestly, I didn't see this yesterday. I haven't looked out this far today. So this is the first time I'm looking at this. And this actually gives me some pause because by the time we get into the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th of October, we should be seeing this lobe of low pressure slide down into the Great Basin. How far west it is will play a big role in what it looks like when it actually impacts our area. So, okay, great. We've got this pattern. What do we actually, what can we look at more down towards the surface? So we'll talk about fire weather concerns. We'll talk about heat for the forecast, and then we'll get into kind of the longer range forecast and talk about the rest of the fall. So, and I will show you where you can see some of this stuff online without having to pay for a service like this. So one of the things I like to do is I will come in here and I will look at, for me, Central California is my big area, but we can also look at other areas. If you're interested in Southern Cal, we can look at that too. I come over here and I look at what is called the 920 bar wind pattern. So this, think of 925 millibars at like local ridge levels. So not like Sierra Crest type stuff, but you know, a couple thousand feet up to 3,000 feet up. So think of that range. So these are the winds at that level. So when we winds at this level, the reason we look at peak wind gusts could be across the ridges, what could get down onto the mid slopes. And then as we get deeper into it as meteorological nerds, we look at how the atmosphere can churn over, how effective it can churn over in the vertical, so that it can actually bring those winds down from up on those ridges down into the valleys and down to the surface. So when that happens, we get an event like we saw in 2017 across Santa Rosa. So it blew gusts in the 60, 70 mile per hour range right in the valley down in Santa Rosa. Whereas up in the peaks, they were gusting estimated gusts well over 100 miles per hour. And from the damage we saw in that event, it was consistent with straight line wind gusts of over 100 miles per hour. So, excuse me. Excuse me again. So as we kind of click through this, this week isn't going to be a big deal, but what we're going to look for is any of these bright colors to show up across our area that have arrows that point out towards the ocean as opposed to towards land. So we're going to be, we'll look at this a little bit, and you can kind of see here, I'm going to go back a little bit. You can see here down in Southern California, the winds come out of the valley and try to work their way up over the Grapevine, and you get some winds coming offshore down over Point Conception, kind of on that western edge of the transverse range. So there is a bit of offshore flow setting up for down there, even Wednesday night into Thursday. So that's always concerning because the fuels are very dry, and we'll talk about fuels here in a few minutes too. So as I click through this, as we get into Friday morning, we start to see the winds come across North Bay, the North Bay counties, out of the north and northeast. Offshore, that's fine. That's out of our very moist area. We're not too terribly concerned about that, but we start to see the wind pattern set up where it's more north across North Bay. It switches during the day, which is pretty typical. It starts to come onshore, but then it goes offshore again early Saturday morning. So we see it coming down from the Redding Red Bluff area, coming right down through the Central Valley and trying to find an easy way out. And so it's that wind is trying to find the easy way out through the Delta, or continuing down the Central Valley, or coming across North Bay. And so you can see those wind speeds really pick up here, and that's pushing like 35 to 40 knots of wind at not at crest level, but at ridgeline level in those areas. So again, down at the surface, you might not see that, but you go up a little bit and you'll see that. And one of the big issues with that is that's where we see like some transmission lines go through. They go up over the hills and things like that. So it's always very concerning when we start to see patterns shape up like this. Get to Saturday morning, and we start to see the wind really pick up across Lake, Napa, Solano, Yolo, Contra Costa, Alameda counties across the ridges. And all of that starts to work its way offshore. During the day, it eases up. And then Sunday morning is the morning that we've all been looking at in our forecast area, because Napa, Sonoma, Marin, Contra Costa, those areas look like they're going to have a kind of a broad scale offshore wind event. So very dry conditions will accompany this. So if we look at this exact same time for moisture, we look at relative humidities. Relative humidities at this exact same time are in the 30s and 40s. And if we just step forward a couple, now we're in Sunday morning. You can see the relative humidities have dropped significantly, even down to the coast. We're down the anywhere between about 10 to 25% relative humidities in some areas. So it's going to be very dry while we have wind coming across the area. So this is triggering fire weather concerns for us. As such, and this hasn't hit the presses yet, hasn't been published on the street yet, but it is in the process of being done in our office. We are issuing a fire weather watch. That'll be coming out here in a little bit today, highlighting the potential threat for fire weather concerns this weekend. So we'll probably have it run Saturday through Monday, and then as we get closer to the event and get more model data in, we can narrow that down to a finer time window. So that is the offshore wind that we're going to be expecting this weekend. As we get into early next week, the winds should become a little bit more benign, not as problematic. You can see a few little offshore puffs, but nothing more than probably 10 to 20 knots at best. So the winds become less of an issue. So now let's talk about heat, because this one is going to be very interesting and a challenge to forecast, to say the least. So this is, I hope the colors make sense to you, the reds, the browns, all that sort of stuff. That is all the hots. the cooler colors, so as you get out to those yellows, oranges, things like that, offshore, and then you get down into the blues, that's where it starts to get cooler. You can see the color scale down at the bottom here. So just kind of stepping through today, for example, and again, this is just one model, so don't take this as gospel. We massage things as we go through, because we take a lot of different model data, but this is the more reliable models that we lean on. So as we were talking about a little bit earlier, a little bit of a warm up as we get towards midweek, and that's the nighttime cooling, and then we warm up again on Wednesday. So it looks like Wednesday is going to be a decently warm day across inland areas, especially Central Valley, which is pretty typical. Let's see, and Thursday, a little cooler. Friday, a little cooler Friday afternoon. Then Saturday, or Friday was just a touch warmer than Thursday. Then Saturday, by Saturday afternoon, it looks like into the hundreds in the North Central Valley, even North Bay into the hundreds, the very low hundreds. One of the problems with this time of year is now today's the fall equinox. So we have equal day and night now. So there's just not as much daylight to spend heating up the earth, but also the sun angle is dropping a bit compared to what we were, 3 months ago. So now it just doesn't have the ability to heat up as readily, but if we have several days of continual heating and we have a warm air mass come over the area, we can still heat up quite significantly. So it looks like this is going to be one of those types of events. So then as we get into Sunday, there you go. So Sunday afternoon, this model up in northern Sonoma County is saying 106. I mean, we're seeing 105s, 104s up through the North Central Valley. And remember, when we looked at that broad scale, we saw that big ridge building up over this region here. So this makes sense that it would happen here. Down in south, it'll still be still touch 100, so it could eclipse the century mark. But it's not as hot as we're expecting up in the northern half of the state in the valleys. One of the issues when things like this happen is warm temperatures occur at higher elevations overnight. So the air mass aloft, so sitting up at ridgeline and above, is very warm. So at night, that keeps those mid slopes and ridges and up, it keeps it very, very warm. So that continues the process of drying all of the fuels up at those higher elevations. And then it ends at those higher elevations as well. So then as we step forward into Monday doesn't look quite as hot, stays super hot in and across the interior, the Central Valley, but right along the coast, the coastal counties, we should get some kind of onshore push in order to give us a little bit of relief. And I'm talking a little bit because up here in Sonoma County, it's still saying 103. So still in the hundreds. And then as we get into, this is Tuesday, again, still a hot day, Central Valley, but continually just like notching down a degree or two across the coastal counties. But overall, this is going to be a very prolonged heat event. So as we get closer to this, today's Tuesday, probably by the time we get to tomorrow or Thursday, we will likely have an excessive heat watch out for some of our areas. Not all the areas, obviously, but some of the areas here in the Bay Area, probably the interior regions of our counties will have an excessive heat watch out. So this is some of the stuff I look at. If you want to look at a few of these things online, all you have to do is Google NCEP models. I shouldn't say Google, use your favorite search engine. And you can actually come over here and just hop through a lot of the model guidance here. And these are all the US models that we use. So you can just select whichever one you want in GFS across North America. Choose your fields that you want. Typically, I like the 925. I think they have it listed here, 925 winds. You can look at some of the winds on here though, and see what's going on, like wind and precip here, and you can just say loop all and just like let it go through. But it does the entire nation. It doesn't boil it down. It's not as pretty as a private sector company. Welcome to the government. But at least you can kind of get an idea of what kind of patterns you might be seeing. And this is precipitation, by the way, this green up here. So we're all looking forward to that happening down in our area. So that's one place you can go look at this stuff. So with all that kind of as a backdrop, one of the things I think of, okay, we have north winds, offshore flow, drying conditions, heating temperatures. We have all this going on. One of the big factors that we had go on in late August and through it seemed like forever in September was smoke. So for smoke, one of my favorite sites to use is airnow.gov. It's fire.airnow.gov, and you can actually look at all of the sensors out there. And if you go to this website, fire.airnow.gov, you'll see this kind of grayish backdrop. That's smoke. That's their estimation of where the smoke is at that moment. So you can see where the smoke's kind of flowing, and the darker it becomes, the higher the concentration is. And then you can just look across the nation for all this sort of stuff. But here in California, you can see up in the Sierra, there are oranges, reds, magentas, yellows, all of that up there, probably because of the creek fire going on down there. But across the Bay Area here, we're pretty much all green. Southern California, lots of yellow, lots of moderate air quality here because of the wind blowing down the valley and up over the Grapevine and getting down into Southern California there. So moderate air quality there. We've been very fortunate here that we've been green for a few days now, which has been really nice. Little hints of moderate here or there as the August complex up here in Mendocino County continues to burn. So this is where my concern comes in. So we have sensitive populations. We have businesses that are sensitive to smoke, might not have air filtration systems set up in their businesses like we should. We don't have it in our office, so when we get smoke coming down across Monterey, it just gets sucked into our office, and it's horrid. But with these fires going on up here, the winds are going to be coming out of the north and then out of the northeast, coming across the Bay Area. So we can expect air quality to take a dive when this happens. That's also going to, with the winds and the dry conditions coming in, that's also going to provide an ample environment, a conducive environment for continued fire growth and smoke production. So if you haven't done so yet, you can always look at CAL FIRE's incident page. This is a fantastic resource to find out where the incidents are across the state. CAL FIRE does a great job, and they even list non-CAL FIRE incidents here. So you can see all the non-CAL FIRE incidents as well. So typically those are federal lands that are burning that they'll list on there. But you can also see the perimeters. For example, the August lightning complex here is a huge perimeter. So largest fire in state history. But that smoke is going to blow right down in the Bay Area as we get into the weekend. So expect these air qualities to come down. Beyond that, in terms of smoke, one of the things, if you want to look at your own smoke forecast, here's what you do. In your favorite search engine, you type in HRRR and HRRR smoke, and the first link here is an experimental smoke forecast. It's just experimental, so use at your own risk because it's really hard to quantify how much the fire is going to burn and how much smoke it's going to output. So with the smoke forecast, the main things you want to do here is you want to, instead of doing full, because we don't want to see the whole US, you can do Southwest, so we just get California. And then here in the times, this date time section right here, the best ones to use are going to be the 0, 6, 12, and 18 Z runs. So essentially every 6 hours, the models will run out the full cycle. So you can see it going all the way out through the end here out to 48 hours, and it goes every hour out to 48 hours. If you get one of the off hours like 14Z, it'll only go out 14 hours. So if you want to get the full run, go for the big one. Now there are two things that you're going to want to look at here. The first one is near surface smoke, and the other one is vertically integrated smoke. So near surface smoke is right here, and vertically integrated smoke is right here. So near surface, hopefully, is very self-explanatory. It's the smoke that the models are projecting to be near the surface where people live. Vertically integrated smoke is the smoke through the entire column of the atmosphere, how much smoke is going to be in that column. So it might be locked up in the mid to upper layers of the atmosphere up in the troposphere. So we'll see it. It'll give us one of those apocalyptic sunrises or sunsets, but we might not recognize it in terms of human factors at the surface. But it's really good to know. So I typically like to look at the vertically integrated smoke first to get an idea of what might be showing up for our communities around the area. So in other words, what are people going to call us about and ask us about? So this is going out those 48 hours. We are not seeing all the way out to the weekend when the winds turn north and coming out of the north and northeast and blowing down into the Bay Area here. So we aren't seeing that quite yet. So you can see that the vertically integrated smoke shows us in the Bay Area, at least, very clear. Across Southern California, it's a mixed bag, and you can see it wrapping back around, depending upon the weather patterns, out towards the coastal portions of Southern California. So that's a vertically integrated smoke. If we click on near surface smoke, and by the way, you can click on these in single time steps. I like to loop it all because I'm a visual learner, so I need things to move and be pretty pictures for me. So the near surface smoke will actually give you the wind barbs as well. So it'll show you which way the wind is blowing at the surface. But when you see purple like this, and let me scroll down a little bit so you can see the concentrations. When you see purple like this out here on the right side of the color bar there, that's forecast to be really bad air quality, like the most unhealthy air quality. So that's all due to the creek fire out there and the Sierra Foothill out there by Yosemite area. So this is a great place to look for smoke. If you follow us on social media, you will see us post graphics from our page that we have internally. You need a username and login in order to get into it. And we will post graphics from here, and we're able to pull off those exact same smoke graphics. So if I do near surface smoke and California, and I'm going to go to the 12 Zulu run, and we're going to run this. This is where we can get graphics with nice, pretty backgrounds and have images located up here. So if you don't follow us on social media yet, all of our offices have Twitter and Facebook. It's at NWS for us in this area. It's at NWS Bay Area, but you could do Sacramento, Los Angeles, San Diego, Eureka, so on and so forth for that. But then we can animate this, and you can see the smoke on a different background with a little bit more of a, I guess, cartoony look. But it also gives real time in terms of days as opposed to Zulu time, which is nice. But so there's that. Okay, let's talk about the forecast a little bit. I'm gonna plop over to here, use this window. And so if you wanna look at the wildfire season forecast, you're going to want to go to our partners at the United States Forest Service. There is what we call a North Ops and a South Ops. And I'll show you this webpage just to give you an idea of the breakdown of where these are at. These are the geographic area coordination centers run by the Forest Service. In California, we have North Ops and South Ops. South Ops is in Riverside, North Ops is in Redding, and you can come here at GACC nifc.gov to get into their site. We're going to look at Northern California. If you want to look at Southern California, by all means, let me know. So come over here. It brings up the current outlook for, it brings up with the current information for the fires and such. That's great. You can find that through CAL FIRE as well. The thing that you want to look at, there are two things. One, the fuels. So if you click on fuel/fire danger, there are a couple things that you can look at on this page. The first one I like to look at is ERCs, energy release components, meaning how much boom is in the sticks. So we have all this fuel out there, but how susceptible is it to actually carry a significant amount of fire? And so we look at this, and I'm going to go to the Mendocino, Midcoast to Mendocino ERC chart. So the higher energy release component, the worse off we are. So you can see in this chart back here in February, when we had a very dry February, we had a lot of energy release component capability for that time of year. The red is the max for that time of year, and the gray here is the average for that time of year. The blue is this year. So follow the blue. We popped up above average for a while. We haven't gotten to the max, but right now we actually dipped way down. And that's because we actually had a bit of a cooling trend finally and a lot of onshore flow. It really helped the fuels to recover a little bit, which was good. But you can see in the last day or two, we've seen a notch up. So we're going to be heading back up, especially as we get into this heat pattern. It'll dry things out very effectively. So this is Midcoast to Mendocino. This one is the Bay Marine Zone, so the lower elevations around the bay. Typically, this is very low. Earlier in the season, we got very high, and we're on our way back up now. So this is a very dangerous area because this is where a lot of our population is around the Bay Area. So this is the field chart that I look at to talk about like the Oakland Hills area and Berkeley and places like that. Places very susceptible to fire and have histories of fire. And then you get to the Diablo and Santa Cruz mountain range. And again, you can see we popped up towards the red, but we're building again. So I know that as we get into this heat wave, it's going to dry a lot of things out, and it's not going to be very, very good for fire potential. The other thing you can look at here is the 100-hour fuel moisture and 1,000-hour fuel moisture. That's essentially saying the size of the sticks that they measure the fuel in just get bigger. So it would take like 1,000 hours to dry something out for the 1,000-hour fuels, dry out that type of fuel under the right conditions. So it's a little bit of a slower burn, if you will. So for these, this is literally about dryness. So the lower you are, the drier you are. And you can see we popped up here, just like we saw in the ERCs, we got better just recently, but it's starting to dry out again. So expect drying and worsening conditions as we get into this heat event. The other thing that you want to look at on this page, and this is where we're going to kind of wrap this all up and kind of put a bow on it and kick it back to Monica, is under outlooks. So under outlooks, again, this is just for the Northern California Geographical Coordination Center, so our North Ops area. The one that I like to look at is I like the 4-month outlook, but you can also look at the 7-day and daily. They give a risk value on the 7-day and daily items. So let's see if I can get this. It's thinking about it. You know, while that does that, I am going to open the 4-month one in a different tab. So the 4-month outlook, and it is timing out there. My internet must be slow today. So the 4-month outlook here is shown here with September on the upper left, October in the top central, and then November through December in the top right. So the red is for, and let me see if I can zoom in here. I don't see my little PDF zoom button. So let's see, I'll just do it old school. So this is for significant fire potential. There's my PDF zoom button. Yeah, I'm gonna zoom back out. There we go. All right, so significant fire potential. So all of Northern California is in a significant fire potential for September. October dumps down to really just kind of the Bay Area, North Central Valley area. And then November through December, that gets into our more wet season, but also it's a lot cooler. So evaporation out of the soils and the vegetation becomes a lot less. So, and these are the reasons behind it. They list out the reasons behind it here. So above normal for all areas in September. We're almost out of September. October 3rd or 5th, you'll see the new one of these come out for the upcoming 4 months. So we'll continue to look for this pattern to set up. This is the main one that I want to highlight here because we're moving out of the season where we could see lightning like we saw in August. But now we're getting into the season where north to northeast winds out of the north and northeast, that offshore flow develops and will become more frequent for more intense high fire risk type situations. So we're seeing that in this late September, and we'll take it right into October as well. So, you know, I'm gonna show you one more thing here because I think it's worth showing. And IRI, CPC, and it says ENSO update right there. We're going to look at El Nino, Southern Oscillation, what we're looking at for La Nina, El Nino, anything like that. So this is like the nerdiest of nerd websites, but I'm just going to go to one graphic and show you what this thing looks like here. So this image is a model prediction. It's model predictions, multiple models for the El Nino Southern Oscillation from this month going forward. So we see these black dots here are observations of sea surface temperatures across the central and eastern equatorial Pacific. And so it's been about 0.5 degree cooler than average. So when we get into that realm, we're talking La Nina, and there's actually a La Nina advisory out right now. So this pattern shows the models are projecting forward for us to stay below that 0.5 degree cooler than normal through much of the winter. And down here are the months. So like this one here, ASO, is August, September, October, then September, October, November. So there are these 3-month running averages throughout. So we're staying below in La Nina. Once we get into January, February, March, April timeframe, you can see a sharp trend in all of the models to be coming back up towards what we call neutral, and that's between the minus 0.5 and the 0.5. So kind of that realm in the middle is when we're pretty much normal for the sea surface temperatures across the central and eastern equatorial Pacific. So what does this mean? Why do I care about this? Well, this is just my first indication, and it's just one data point, and I still have yet to dig into all the other data points because it's going to take some time. This is my first indication to say, okay, well, La Nina for winters on the West Coast, it favors a storm track that impacts the Pacific Northwest. So that means look for storm tracks in general to track towards the Northwest. That doesn't mean we can't get storms down here during a La Nina winter because we have history of those as well, and some pretty significant ones at that. But then when we move into ENSO neutral, that El Nino Southern Oscillation neutral phase, more normal, that gives you a much more well-distributed storm track across the West. The last time that we saw a pattern like this, where we dipped into a weak La Nina and came out into an El Nino Southern Oscillation neutral phase, so we go La Nina to a neutral phase in the middle of the winter, so January, February, March, February, March, April, those types of timeframes, we get back into a neutral phase. Last time we saw this was winter 16-17, so going from 2016 into early 2017. And if you've been around the Bay Area long enough and you remember winters, in January, February of 2017, those 2 months, we saw over a dozen atmospheric rivers impacted just the Bay Area. So it was very wet. We ended up the water year over 300% in a lot of areas of normal annual precipitation. So it was a very wet year. With all the burn scars on the ground right now, and everything that we still have yet to go through with fire season, we are looking at a very impactful winter. So we could be in for it. I've been briefing a lot of our county partners to be prepared for the worst because of what I just told you last time we saw a pattern like this was 16-17. They remember it very acutely, and a lot of them, especially places like Santa Cruz County, are still recovering from the winter of 17. And that was over 3 years ago. We're pushing 4 years ago now. So all that said, we have a lot of fire season left to go through, and we have a ton of winter to go through. So be prepared, be ready, have a plan in place, work with your partners, with other companies, make sure that you guys have cross collaboration platforms that you can utilize and you can learn from each other. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Monica and let her do her wonders from there.
Thank you, Brian, for kind of walking us through some of that. And I will coordinate with you to get the links to some of the websites that are more open source and accessible for people. And we'll compile those into kind of the follow-up email, as well as I'll work on building a quick links around weather, like we have for heat waves and wildfires and smoke and all of that. The CRA will build a weather quick links to bring together some of these resources for people.
Yeah,
we do have
sorry I talked so long, Monica. Didn't mean to.
So we are getting some comments made back of fantastic presentations, great presentation. So definitely had a lot of value. We have a few questions. Some of them I might work with you a little bit offline and get back to you afterward. Let's start with one of them. Is you had mentioned briefly in regards to the shift from lightning storms to kind of the offshore wind events, and somebody said, what's the outlook in regards to seeing more lightning storms like we saw in mid-August? Is that something we're likely to see?
Yeah, in terms of for the rest of the year, the likelihood is slim to none. But now going forward, that's a totally different story. A lot of what's happened and a lot of the impacts from what's happened can be traced back very clearly to a changing climate. Whatever your thought process is on climate change, I'm just talking about science. I don't care about opinions. I'm not giving my opinion at all here, but just all of the things that go back in our area specifically to the 4.5-year drought that we had at the beginning of the 2010s, that really played heavily into what happened this year. And I was talking to my counterpart in the LA office, and they have a much longer, broad-scale drought time frame that has caused impacts for them. So as we go forward with a warming climate, when you warm the air in the atmosphere, and we continue to do so, it has the capability to hold more water vapor. So that means it has a capacity to have more moisture in it. So when we have moisture, okay, that's great. We're warming the sea surface temperatures as well. So that means we can also have tropical systems that are more well organized and more well sustained. So that's what happened this year for our lightning event. We had a tropical system move off of Mexico. It got sheared apart eventually as it kind of shifted into the north. And when it got sheared apart, it ripped off some of that moisture content and pulled it up towards us. And it had, because we had been so hot, there were a couple things. It had the atmospheric dynamics to turn over in the vertical, but then we were so hot for an extended stretch, we actually had radiant heat coming off the ground to essentially be sitting under those storms, just giving it an extra flick to add a little bit more convective action to it, a little bit more turnover in the atmosphere. And so all of that came together perfect. So when we're talking about the future of things like this, this is no longer a one-hit wonder. We saw this back in 2008. We saw a really decent lightning event come across our area. We saw this year. We are going to start seeing things like this. We're going to start seeing the probability higher and higher over the years. But will we see it next year? Not likely. Will we see it the year after that? Not likely. But another 5-10 years down the road, probably we'll see it again. The return interval is typically about 20 to 25 years, but that's shrinking as we go forward in time. I hope that answers the question.
I think that did answer the question. Looking at the time, we have about 2 minutes left, so I am going to wrap up on that. There were some questions on kind of resources for global weather systems, as well as monitoring local wind speeds. I will connect with you, Brian, on getting a collection of resources there and share those out.
Yeah, keep talking, Monica.
Okay, I will talk while you pull something up. Another question was on debris flow risks during heavy winter precipitation. The CRA is reaching out to the USGS, which coordinates the hazard assessment maps for those debris or burn scars, to give a presentation on exactly that topic. And the CRA will also be doing 2 debris flow hazard assessment map briefs this year. One will come out kind of latter portion of October, and then another one will come out later in November, just to share kind of what is the hazard assessments the USG has done on all the burn scars. And then there was a question in regards to KML and shape files. I do know that some of those exist, and I will coordinate with you, Brian, as well, to see if you know of others that I am not aware of.
Yes.
So there will be more information coming in the follow-up email that will go out to everybody who registered for this webinar, and I'll also work on building it into the quick links page on the CRA website that I mentioned. And Brian has just pulled up the post-fire debris flow hazard assessment maps I was talking about. And the CRA briefs contain the current year's fire plus the past few years' fire, since the risk remains for a couple of years potentially. Then, yeah, Brian, Abby, if you have any last words?
Yeah, I'll do 2 things really quick. On our webpage, weather.gov/Bay Area, under observations, that's a great place to see real-time observations. The Fire Weather Snooper, great place. Again, weather.gov/Bay Area. Just look for these things. And the little hamburger thing over here has a bunch of menu items that you can choose from. But you can actually look at real-time observations for any of these sites. Yellow ones are flirting with red flag. Red ones are in red flag criteria. Post-wildfire debris flows are a huge, massive deal, and we are working very closely with CGS, CAL FIRE, Forest Service, USGS, everybody, to make sure that we can put out warnings for those when we have high-intensity rain rates on burn scars that could cause a post-wildfire debris flow. And those only happen in high-intensity rain rates. When it's low intensity rain rates over a long period of time and the land gives way, that's a legit landslide. It's not just a debris flow. That's a full-blown landslide. So I'll leave it at that. If you, Monica, if you want to talk more after this and I can show you some stuff that you might want to put on the website, we can do that too.
Perfect. We will definitely coordinate on that, and we'll have more information coming in regards to debris flows as well. Abby, any final words from you?
No, I think Brian said it all, and I appreciate everything coming through. Although he did not mention that he also coordinates with Cal OES. Yeah, everybody always throws out Cal Fire, which we love Cal Fire. Don't get me wrong, I love my colleagues, but Cal OES is right there in the thick of things too. So other than that,
we coordinate crazy with Cal OES too, Abby.
Yeah.
From tsunamis to post-wildfire debris flows and everything in between.
All hazards. So, but thank you. Appreciate having this. It was very interesting look behind the curtain. And I hope that everything you said is going to happen doesn't actually happen. I hope you're wrong. But other than that, I'm good.
Well, thank you to both of you, Abby for helping co-host and Brian for the presentation today. And as Abby said, taking us kind of on that behind the scenes, explaining what the thought process is behind why certain weather events happen and what you're seeing when you look at the map. That'll help members kind of in their own ability to look at these maps and understand what the forecasts and the warnings and the watches are all meaning and what to do with them. So thank you again. This will conclude our webinar. And again, it'll follow up with a follow-up email with more resources and links. And sorry for the questions we were not able to get to, but we will definitely follow up on those. Have a wonderful rest of the week, everybody. Thank you for joining.